Git is both simple and complex. You can usually get through your workday by memorizing a few commands, but under the hood, there's so much more to it. Today, we'll dive deep into Git with a special guest, Monica Powell. Let's dive in.
Welcome to the Ladybug Podcast. I'm Kelly.
I'm Allie.
And I'm Emma, and we're debugging the tech industry. Vonage is a cloud communications platform that allows developers to integrate voice, video, and messaging into their applications using their communication APIs. Whether you're wanting to build video calls into your app, create a Facebook bot, or build applications on top of programmable phone numbers, you'll have all the tools you need. Formerly known as Nexmo, Vonage has you covered for all API communications projects. Sign up for an account at nexmo.dev/ladybug and use promo code LDBUG10 for €10 of free credit. Again, that's nexmo.dev/ladybug and use code LDBUG10 for €10 of free credit.
AWS Amplify is a suite of tools and services that enables developers to build full-stack serverless and cloud-based web and mobile apps using their framework or technology of choice on the front end.
Using Amplify, you can quickly get up and running with things like hosting, authentication, managed GraphQL, serverless functions, APIs, machine learning, chatbots, and storage for files like images, videos, and PDFs.
Amplify is built especially in a way to enable traditionally front-end developers like myself to be successful because they can use their existing skill set to build real-world full-stack apps that in the past would require deep knowledge around backend, DevOps, and scalable infrastructure.
The Amplify console then allows you to use a GitHub repository to deploy a globally available CDN with CI and CD built in. You can learn more about building applications with Amplify at awsamplify.info/ladybug. Again, that's awsamplify.info/ladybug.
So really excited today to have a special guest with us to record this Git episode. So Monica, you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Monica Powell. I'm a software engineer at Newzella, and I am also very active online within the open source community. And I was recently selected to be a GitHub star based on my involvement within the community. So I'm excited to be here today to talk a bit more about Git.
Awesome. Thanks so much for being here. So I think we can just kind of dive right in. I think it's probably worth starting at the difference between Git and GitHub because they are not the same thing. So what is Git?
So Git is a version control software. So it's actually underlying what most people probably come to expect when they're interacting with a site like GitHub to make changes to shared code. But a lot of the social aspects of using Git and GitHub, or a lot of the social aspects of using Git are built because of GitHub. So GitHub is providing like this social interface on top of Git's software. So in order to be able to collaborate easily, visually, a lot of that is powered by Git, whereas like the actual underlying logic of how different changes are resolved and such is powered by Git.
I like to explain this sometimes to new developers as like, you know, on your computer, how you'll often have resume V1, V2, resume for X job, resume for Y job. Normally you'd want to track those updates and have them in one place. And Git allows you to do that for your software. So you'll have multiple versions of the same software on different branches, and then you can have multiple developers collaborating to that, and it's easy to track. And so if anything goes wrong, we can kind of go back in history and go back to a commit or a place that worked. And then GitHub is the social network on top of that.
I never considered GitHub to be a social network, but I guess it is.
Yeah, it kind of is. You know, you can follow people and work together and collaborate on projects. So yeah, that's, I think, how I would explain it.
I like that. I like that analogy. When I was finishing up my audiobook for Start Freelancing Today, my husband was the one who actually edited the file, and he uploads the file just being audiobook v3 final _ It was literally the only copy of it, but you know, might as well just go with it.
Classic. That's such a thing when you're like editing things or whatever. But Git takes care of that process for us with code. So you don't need to have a file named final or multiple files at all. You can just have different branches. pretty amazing. So, and then with GitHub, that's a remote. So it's like where the code is hosted and you can collaborate with other developers on there. But there are also other remotes as well, like GitLab and Bitbucket. Does Bitbucket still exist? I
It
think
does still exist.
It does still exist.
Unfortunately. Okay, no hate against Bitbucket. I used it when GitHub did not have the free availability for private repos, but I still have some clients who use Bitbucket, and they keep on wanting me to push all of our code over to Bitbucket, and I really don't appreciate it. I can't exist in two spaces at the same time. It just does not work here.
I think I have one maybe with code on it from when I was a baby dev, and different tutorials would have like push to Bitbucket instead of push to GitHub. And I didn't realize that I could just push it to GitHub instead. So I was like, okay, I guess this code just goes on Bitbucket instead of GitHub. But I think that's my only Bitbucket experience.
So how does GitLab vary? Like, I've never used GitLab before. Have either of you used it?
So I've only used GitHub for I guess my Git version control on a remote place. So I'm not super sure like what the differences are between. My understanding is GitHub is by far like the most mature and like the most adopted of the platforms. So I've just stuck with that.
I have a couple of friends who have worked for GitLab. I know they're deep in the Vue community. I think they're probably built on Vue, is my guess. Like GitHub's built on Rails. But I think they also had some differences with the private repositories back in the day, which was a big selling point. But now GitHub has those as well. So I'm not really sure if there are too many different features at this point, but just different alternatives.
Well, one cool thing about GitLab is that it's open source. So you can actually like see how the website works end to end, whereas like everything on GitHub or a lot of the infrastructure on GitHub is private. There are certain parts of the infrastructure that are exposed. For example, if you want to know like how GitHub analyzes the languages of a repository, there's a repository for you to go into that. I believe it's called Linguist. But I know some people prefer GitLab because of their commitment to actually being completely open source. So that may be like a differentiator for some people, depending on where they're coming from.
Okay.
Oh, that's a big one. That's really interesting.
So what do you say we start digging into some of the concepts around Git? Because I know when I first started learning how to do anything with version control, Git was super overwhelming because I'm like, what are all these commands and how am I going to remember all of these? So let's start at the very like basics.
Cool. Should we talk about add first? Because I feel like that's the one that, well, git init is the first one. Mm-hmm. So maybe we should talk about git init first. So what does git init do?
So if you have a directory on or a folder on your local computer, if you want to actually start tracking the versions of changes, you need to run git init, which will create an empty repository. And you may not actually notice any differences visually. I know for like Mac computers, you have to go and look into the hidden like dot files in order to see like what was created by the git init. And then you'll start seeing there's like this git folder and it has a bunch of stuff in it that is necessary for you to track the changes. So that's definitely a good place to start if you're not like using a pre-existing repository and you're starting from scratch on your computer.
I've never actually looked under the hood of what's in that .git folder, now that I'm thinking about it.
This is a really deep concept. So there's this blog post series that I love that's understanding Git for real by exploring the .git directory. So we can actually link that in the show notes because I think it's probably a lot to try to explain on air because it's like a directive graph data structure and all these like really complex things. So it might be better just to link that blog post, but it is really cool. There's so many different files that are generated and then it just tracks the diffs between the different files.
There's so much in here. I'm just like scrolling through this blog post and just, okay, well, I guess I know what I'm going to be doing today. Okay, so now we've established init. Let's go to add because this is another command that we use a lot. So what does the add command do?
So the add command will actually make it so that Git is tracking specific files. So when you or when you first like initialize the repo, the Git repo, Git isn't gonna like automatically add every single file into like the version control history. You have to explicitly like opt in that you want it to track changes for certain files. So if you do Git add, you can do like a dot, which would add every single file within the current directory, which I don't recommend. I did it a lot when I was first learning to use Git. But you can then like accidentally add files that you don't mean to commit, meaning like large generated files, or if you have secret files, like secret meaning containing like API keys or sensitive data. So I would recommend actually like using Git add to add like specific files or specific folders. And you also, it kind of goes along with having a .git ignore, so that way if you do Git add, anything that's within the Git ignore file will not be added to the version control history, which is important, I think, just to make everyone's life easier. Yeah.
I think that Git ignore file is actually something that's really worth touching on in more detail, like what exactly it does. Because as you said, you don't want to be tracking literally everything in that directory. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, you're going to be exposing potential API keys and environmental variables and all those fun things that the world should not be seeing. So setting up that Git ignore file is really key to me. It's one of the first things that I do. And thankfully, GitHub helps with templating it for you to, not track node modules, for example, because nobody wants to track their node modules folder.
I love that. I've had students in the past, they're like, oh, Git push is taking like 15 minutes to run. Like, what is going on? I don't understand. It's like, oh, your node modules, there's like thousands and thousands of files, and those are already on GitHub. We don't need to repush those on there. That's why it's taking like 15 minutes for Git push to run. But also API keys, you don't want to rack up a bunch of charges because somebody stole your API key. Super important.
Definitely.
This might be a bit of a tangent of sorts, but let's say you forgot to include something on that Git ignore file, and it includes, let's say, an API key. You can remove something from the remote, wherever it is, but it still in some sense exists on there, doesn't it? Like there's a history of it.
Yes. So if you just, depending on how you update your files in Git, and once it's pushed to the remote repository, that's kind of like in the public, or maybe not the public, but like other people who have access to that repository can view it. And you really have to rewrite the history of Git a certain way in order to obfuscate keys when you are trying to remove them from the history. I would recommend probably just invalidating the key versus like messing around with Git too much in order to try to conceal something that was accidentally committed.
I would be the one who just removes everything and just starts fresh. Just take the option. Yes, RMRF. Just like delete everything. Let's start over.
Yeah, rmrf.git. That's funny. Okay, cool. So commit, I believe, is the next one that we need to talk about. So what does commit do?
So Git commit is associating like certain, like if you make changes to multiple files or just make changes to one file, and then you add the diffed version of that file to Git, and then when you actually commit it, it's like you're creating some type of description of what those changes were. And so later you can look based off of like, if you're looking at the description, or each commit will have like a unique hash, you can look up by the hash and go directly back to those changes. So it's helpful for you to actually track kind of like in human readable language what changes were made together and what was happening.
So let's talk about that a little bit more as far as the messages go, the descriptions. There's such thing as a good commit message, and there's such thing as a not so good commit message. As you know, please work is probably not going to be very helpful. Button mashing the keyboard is probably also not going to be helpful.
Let's be real though, we have all been there. We've always all had the like, please work or test again or please work this time. We've all had that commit message.
My best-selling product on my store is the Git log that says me saying please work 14 times. So yeah, we've all been there. Okay, so now let's move to the next stage. So we've added some files. We're committing those changes with the message. So now we need to actually push that up to remote. So what is Git push?
So when you do Git push, that's actually pushing those changes up to some remote URL. So when you do the, when you do Git init, you don't usually have a remote URL set. So you would have to when you actually push, I guess make sure that you have a remote URL set so that Git knows where those changes should be pushed up to. And you can always change that URL later if you need to. And if you fork something from GitHub or clone something from GitHub, or it will already have those remote URLs set, and then you can potentially change them depending on your purposes. But back to I guess your original question, Git push is making it so that those changes on your local file system in Git are actually being reflected in some other place based off of the URL that you set.
I have a weird question, and I don't know if either of you know the answer to this, but what is the origin of origin? Where did that come from as being the default that we use, Git push origin main, for example? No idea.
No idea.
I just type it.
I'm not sure.
It's these things that we just kind of learn to use over time. I don't know why I'm using this, but I'm using it anyway.
I mean, I'm not sure if it's the remote is supposed to be the central place, but I'm not sure where the naming convention came from.
One other quick tangent before we move on. There's a really funny Twitter account that pulls whenever you have a swear word in your commit message, it tweets it out. And so it's called developer swearing. It's pretty funny. It'll be things like, some of these are really bad, but
these are really great. I'm
trying shit again, or I fucked it up, removed shit. It's just super funny because they're not good commit messages, but we've all been there, been frustrated at our code.
I mean, this is so relatable.
So relatable.
Okay, I'm going to be scrolling through that all day. I should probably go back to this. Okay.
No, you're good. It's real too. It's not just that the Twitter account making these up. It's pulled from the GitHub API. Okay, cool. So we've talked about commit push. So these are the ones that I would say you'll probably use all day, every day. The add, commit, push trio. Mm-hmm. Whenever you want your code to be backed up to a remote GitHub or something along those lines, you'll need to run those three commands to get your code up there. So I'd say those are the fundamental three commands.
I think another one that's used a lot is git pull.
We've been talking about AWS Amplify and how it's a really fast and easy way to develop mobile and web apps on AWS. Are you interested in finding out more? Well, if you are, we have good news. AWS just announced open registration for their annual big event. It's called reInvent. No surprise that it's a virtual event this time, but the new news is they've made it a free event this year. There are plenty of Amplify sessions, from general intro sessions to deeper dives. You should check them out. Use this URL to find out more about the sessions and register. www.awsamplify.info/ladybug2. Again, that's www.awsamplify.info/ladybug2.
Keep track of code changes in real time with Datadog. Create customizable dashboards for Git and 400 plus other technologies in minutes using a simple drag and drop interface. Easily analyze your Git commits alongside your other application's metrics and events so you can track the performance impact of your code changes. Try Datadog today with a free trial at datadog.com/ladybug. If you install the agent, Datadog will send you a free t-shirt. Again, that's datadog.com/ladybug.
So we should also talk about pull or rebase.
I can't, honestly, rebase is not something that I use regularly, so it is not something that I can really speak with any sense or any knowledge of. I would just be making some things up. But git pull is something that I use a lot, which is pulling from the remote down locally. So you can pull like a specific branch, or you can, wherever you are. So you can pull what's most recently updated on the GitHub repo down to your local environment, which is really useful, especially if you're collaborating with multiple developers.
Yeah, I would also say like I use pull a lot more than I use rebase. I know for rebase, you're actually like rewriting the Git history. So that might be helpful in the case of like if you leaked your API keys, or if you want to clean up changes that you made, like if you had like 10 like does this work commits, then you might want to squash those or rebase those into something that is more meaningful. But I know that if you're pushing to a shared branch, you do want to be careful about rebasing, because it does affect other people's workflows in a different way than like most pushes to shared GitHub branches, since it is actually rewriting the history and changing changing the hashes for some of the commits. So people may like lose their work or run into more merge conflicts. Like it can all be resolved, but it can cause like unnecessary problems if you're rebasing a branch that you've pushed to remote and other people are also using that same branch.
Yeah, I've actually worked on teams that use like a push-pull workflow and teams that work on a rebase workflow. So instead of running like a push for your final commit or whatever, you would do a rebase. And so I think they're just two different workflows, and depends on whatever team that you're working on, like what they end up using.
Yeah, I definitely think just making sure everyone's like on the same page in terms of the workflow will go the wrong way. But if people are doing different things, there could be conflict.
For sure. Yeah, this is where documentation about your build process is very useful.
Yeah, or a commit, or what's it called? A contributor document, which has your rules for how people commit to your repos.
How they contribute.
It's how you can be a good member of the community. And I think we'll talk about that a little bit too later on, is how to actually contribute to open source and the best practices for that.
So let's talk about branches, because when you create a GitHub repo, there is a default main branch there, but theoretically, you should not be doing all of your work on that one main branch. You should be creating multiple branches. So let's talk about the concept of a branch first. Like, what exactly does it mean to create a branch?
I'm trying to think of a good, like, I guess the best visual is kind of like a tree trunk. Since that's like adding the Git lingo. But so like your main branch, your like, I guess, yeah, the main thing is still a branch. So you can kind of think of like the main branch as like the tree trunk. And then if you want to make changes that are based off of the main branch and it will eventually go back into the main branch, you will want to like branch off into it and create your own separate branch. And then like as you make changes, they're isolated to that branch. And then like on GitHub, if you open a pull request, then you can compare like all of the changes that you made that were isolated to your branch to the main branch. And depending on what changes have happened since you made changes, you might have to like update to pull in the latest changes from the main branch. But it's kind of like just setting it up so that you can isolate what the changes are that you're making, so that you're not like polluting the main branch, and you also clearly know like what changes are being introduced before they're actually introduced into the main branch.
Definitely. I almost think you could think of it as almost a subway map or something along those lines, whatever it's called in your city, New York subway, DC
MARTA.
Metro, anything along the MARTA. I have no idea about Atlanta. Actually, I got my social media like flashbacks, and I was actually in Atlanta a year ago as of this recording.
And I wasn't in town.
The world was so different. I know. So sad. The world was a different place. But you could think of it almost as a subway map where maybe multiple lines start out of the same station. So they start in the same place, and then they branch out so that they can go to different locations. And along the ways, they have different stations, which would be our commits. They're like little stops along the ways. But then maybe those divergent lines come back together at certain points. And different things that you might have different branches for would be for a feature that you're working on. So if you're working on a new user interface component or something along those lines, or a brand new addition to your application, you would probably do that on a branch. You would probably have a branch for different bug fixes. What else would you have different branches for?
So we do, if we're doing, let's say, we're redesigning an entire product display page for a client, for a merchant, we'll have one primary feature branch that's going to consist of all the changes once they're ready to push the page live. And then each developer, as they're working on different features, they branch off of that primary branch. So they merge into the new feature branch before we merge that into the main. So kind of creating, like, as you said, like working our way out. So again, you can track who's working on what over this whole large feature.
Yeah, and different teams will have different conventions for that as well. There are different Git workflows that you may have to follow. And the ones that we've been kind of talking about normally fit under the name like Git flow. That's the strategy we've kind of been talking about, but I know there are different Git strategies as well.
I've done like some trunk-based development where you are actually pushing changes directly to the main branch. So that's working in kind of this like extreme programming environment, doing a lot of pairing, or there's also mobbing where you're working with at least two other engineers, making sure that like other people are getting their eyes on code before it goes into the main branch, but really relying a lot on automation in terms of detecting regressions and things like that, and knowing that you can quickly revert, which is a very different workflow than working primarily on branches and opening pull requests. So I have had experience like with both workflows.
I want to unpack some of what you just said there, just for some definitions. So let's start with extreme programming. What is that?
So I'm not sure of like the textbook definition of extreme programming, but in terms of from my understanding, it's focusing on emphasizing a lot of like communication and close collaboration in order to reduce the feedback cycles when you're developing. So if you are doing or if you're mainly like working by yourself and then pushing up a pull request to GitHub, then there's probably going to be a lapse before another engineer is able to actually review the changes that you made. So when you're doing extreme programming, those like feedback cycles are a lot tighter because you can just like in real time talk through like different approaches and changes that you want to make. So that's how I like came to understood extreme programming, like looking for ways to optimize like feedback cycles. There's also a large emphasis on test-driven development within extreme programming, and really like building out a robust like test infrastructure, which is important if you are going to be like pushing directly to the main branch, and then that's going to go out into production or some other deployment pipeline. So that's kind of how I have come to understand it. But there's like books that are written about extreme programming and blog posts if people are interested in really like diving more into the specific definitions and practices that are within that philosophy.
It sounds so intense, like just by the name of it, like I'm just like extreme programming, just like slamming on the keyboard, typing really quickly kind of thing. So that's clearly not what it is.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think it can sometimes feel intense just in terms of like, it is very different. I think mentally, like just like coding alone versus like coding with someone else, and like having to go through like back and forth through that whole process with somebody else. I think it kind of does push you a little bit differently than working alone does. I've also done like some mob programming for one of my old teams. We wanted to refactor a lot of our code, but we wanted to make sure that everyone was on the same page about like what the conventions were that we were using moving forward. And so we were able to accomplish a lot. Like one single person wouldn't have been able to like make the decisions of what conventions we want. And there would have been like, it would have taken a lot longer if we did it like asynchronously. So I would say there are like some like intense or extreme aspects to doing extreme programming for sure.
Mob programming sounds kind of fun, like also frustrating, but also kind of fun. I've always worked kind of in a very solo environment, maybe pairing with like one other person, but having multiple people work on the same problem at the same time on the same machine just seems like it'd be a cool experience.
Yeah, it can be cool.
One other thing that you mentioned are regressions. So what are regressions?
So regressions are when you have something like in production, everything works fine. So say you have an e-commerce site, users can check out, everything's good. And then you push some changes. Maybe they were on the shopping cart page, maybe they weren't. And then you realize like, oh wait, people can't add items to their cart anymore.
I've never done that before.
So at some point there was some type of change that was introduced into the code base that caused that like vital user flow to break. So you can have different types of regressions. So you could have visual regressions where maybe visually the website no longer looks how it should, but at one point it did. Or you could have like I would say more extreme regressions where like there's some type of change that was introduced that prevents like critical user behavior. And I would say that's different than like if you launch a new feature and there's already like there's some defect like from the beginning. But I would say regression is specifically like when code that was once functioning properly no longer is like functioning as expected.
Cool. While we're talking about things potentially going wrong, there are two topics that I wanted to talk a little bit about. First is debugging with Git. This is something that I actually don't know a ton about, but I have seen a lot of conference talks about it, and that's using Git bisect to debug. Have either of you ever done this?
So I haven't used Git bisect. I was actually like looking it up before this conversation, and I thought it was cool that it is a like built-in Git command that can help you like actually identify like specific commits the specific commit that introduced a regression. So my understanding and like based off of like some fiddling around is you would like type the Git bisect commands and you would put the current commit or the latest commit would be like labeled as a bad commit. And then you would like go to the Git log, find some commit way back when that actually is working as expected. And then Git bisects will then like it will like smartly pull like another commit for you to check to see like, oh, is this commit good or bad? So you would have to actually like compile your code, see if it works as expected. And then you would say like, this is good or this is bad. And then like keep doing that until bisect helps you identify where the regression was introduced. There's also like some like scripting and automation that can be done to actually like do this a lot faster than someone manually doing it. But it does use like some more like efficient algorithms than like if a person was manually trying to like go back and find it with like a naive approach.
Which is what I do.
Yeah, it seems like oh, for sure. It seems like such a cool tool. I've never used it personally, but I think it's a really common like conference talk topic because I keep seeing conference talks on it. So we can link some of those in the show notes if people are interested in diving a little deeper, because the people who use it seem to really love it and enjoy it. So might be something worth looking into, especially if you're looking for some new fun trick to level up your Git workflow.
I think that's why I love Git so much is that I use it every single day. And there are still these commands. I have zero idea how they work. And they can improve my workflow so much if I just take some time to learn them. I love that.
Definitely. So another thing for debugging within Git is Git blame. Anybody want to talk about that one? And it sounds kind of rude, like blame, but people have talked on Twitter about renaming it to something like that, like something a little bit more positive.
Git friendly feedback.
Yeah.
So Git blame, it will show you like for every single like line or change within a file. So you look at like the current file, and you can see like when was this like constant introduced, or maybe when was this constant like renamed, and it will show you who made that commit, and it'll show you when they made that commit. So you can see, like, was this a change that was introduced yesterday? Was this a change that was introduced 3 years ago? So I find it helpful to just like get more context as to whether something was a recent decision or a more like legacy decision. Maybe I can like figure out who introduced a certain change and have a conversation with them to get more context. I've also found it helpful for like I use VS Code for a lot of my development. So they have a extension called Git Lens, and it'll actually show you like within the VS Code editor the git blame if you like hover over a line. So sometimes when I'm like making changes, if I don't remember like did I make this change, like then I can see like okay, I made this change 3 minutes ago. And I think it's just a little bit more orienting than me having to like go check the entire diff to see what changes I made. I'm just being able to see quickly like okay, this is something that I renamed or moved while I was making these changes. So I found it helpful just to kind of help orient me into what I'm doing.
So agree. The Git Lens VS Code extension is a must-have, in my opinion. It'll really, really help make your Git workflow even easier and built into your text editor if you use VS Code. And I'm sure that there are similar ones for other text editors as well, but I think VS Code has a really big market share as it is right now. So don't even have to worry about that.
That's one of the first extensions I ever install when I'm setting up like a new workspace for VS Code. It is an absolute must for me.
Definitely. Okay, so similar to what we've been talking about with Git blame, well, I guess it's along a similar line, is merge conflicts. So merge conflicts happen when two people work on the same piece of code, maybe on different branches or something along those lines, or in different commits, and then you try to pull a rebase, and Git tells you, oop, this other person also edited this line of code. You did as well. Whose changes should we use? It doesn't know how to automatically combine them. So these are something that you'll see a lot when you're working with more than one developer, but they look a little bit scary at first and can be a little bit difficult, especially way back in the day when before we had really amazing developer tools and it was just a bunch of like arrows that showed up in your code with like a hash number and you had to weed through that and maybe do like Command F in your project for a bunch of equal signs or something. Mm-hmm. But now VS Code has a really amazing tool that you can just be like, accept incoming changes or use current changes, which makes the process a lot easier and a lot less scary. But anybody have any other thoughts on merge conflicts and that whole situation?
Yeah, I know like sometimes I'll like be like, okay, I want to get my branch into like the main branch before someone else does so that I can avoid potentially having to deal with merge conflicts. Because sometimes you could have like a PR that you open and like if you have continuous integration and you can see like all your unit tests are passing, then someone makes a change to the main branch and now you have merge conflicts. And then you have to actually like fix those before your code is green. So I have found like sometimes they can like slow you down if you're like, okay, I'm ready to merge, and it's like just kidding. There's merge conflicts. And then in terms of like complexity, I would say that there are different levels of like complexity that happen when you have merge conflicts. So it could be just like someone added like an extra import and now they're using it in one place and it's very clear, like, okay, I just want to accept all of the changes, both mine and the ones from the remote. But it does get more complicated when like one of the branches is doing refactoring to make sure that like you're not undoing someone's changes as you're like resolving the merge conflict. So depending on like how involved it is, it might be helpful to like reach out to or pair with the person whose changes are conflicting with yours. If it's like a larger change where it's like pretty much like everything kind of moved around, I think that's just like helpful to reduce the chances of accidentally introducing a regression or like undoing somebody else's work. And then also unit tests can be very helpful. Like when you're resolving merge conflicts, assuming both sets of changes have good unit test coverage, then like once you resolve the merge conflicts, like being able to have the confidence that like, okay, all of the unit tests are still passing in this merge state. I would also recommend like actually like compiling the code, or if you have like deploy previews, checking out the deploy preview just to make sure that there's nothing like weird or unexpected that happened as you resolve the merge conflict, if it's something that's like more involved.
Awesome. There are two themes that I want to pull out of that. First is testing, and we have a whole episode on testing if anybody's interested in learning more about that, just because I know we keep mentioning it. And so if that's a new concept to you, we will link that in the show notes. The second one, and this keeps coming up as a theme, is that Git really does allow you to work with other developers more smoothly, and it is built for that. It allows you to collaborate better, not having everybody overwriting each other's code and different versions are tracked. But it's still so important to actually communicate with your coworkers and to talk to them about their code. It does not replace that. And having communication about, I'm working on this, so maybe you want to work on this other feature so we don't conflict, or something along those lines. Those are still important conversations to have.
I think it's definitely important to note as well, like when you run into a merge conflict, it does not mean that you're a bad developer. I think we immediately see a merge conflict and we're like, oh crap, we messed up somewhere. And it's not necessarily that. As you said, like there could be some just very minor changes that had been made and you just need to sync that up. So it's not a testament to your ability to code or your ability to contribute to open source projects or whatever. To me, it's a very normal thing that you can run into when you're collaborating with multiple developers.
Definitely.
Amazing. And something you also brought up, Monica, was PRs, which are pull requests. And these are actually a GitHub specific feature. So they're not built into Git. They're built into whatever remote or whatever that you're using. So what is a pull request?
So a pull request is, so if you had like a branch that you were working on locally and you push that up to GitHub, if you go to the repository, you can then do, open a pull request, which is basically creating like a visual diff between your branch, and you can do it against any other branch. Usually people do it off of the main branch. But if you're maybe working off of like another branch, you might like want to merge it directly into that branch. So you have this visual diff of your changes in whatever branch you're trying to compare it to. And then another developer can leave or whoever who has GitHub access can leave comments on the pull request, like on specific lines that change, and ask questions. So they could potentially ask like, oh, is there a reason this had to be rewritten? Or if you're using something like TypeScript, they may have feedback on like, are you typing your code properly? Or maybe there's a different way that you could type it. It's really to have like a conversation. And then if you someone can also leave just like high level comments overall that aren't specific to a line of code. So they could just maybe summarize their feedback. And then when you are actually reviewing the code, you can either approve the code. So you're explicitly saying like, I think this is ready to be merged into the branch that it's being compared to. You could just leave a comment, which is neutral. It's like you don't approve it, but you're also not saying like there's something that needs to change. And then the other status is you're requesting changes, meaning that there is some feedback that you'd like to be addressed before the changes are merged into the main branch. And on GitHub, you can set up different rules for branches. So you could say like, if someone's going to merge into the main branch, then it requires at least 2 approvals. So that way, changes aren't introduced without at least 2 people actually giving them the green light. If you're merging into a branch that isn't the main branch, usually the protections are more flexible. So you maybe don't even need anyone to approve it. But then like once that other branch is merged, then you would need to satisfy whatever the minimum review requirements are. And then also another, I think, cool thing about GitHub pull request is now, there's integrations, I know with like Vercel and Netlify, where if you're deploying to those hosting companies, you can actually see a deploy preview very easily of the changes that you made specifically in that branch, like live. So it's like a cool way to get a nice like staging site up and have it in the context of the branch. And you can also have different like CI things that are running when you open a specific pull request. So you can have like all of your unit tests run, linting. I recently set up a GitHub action that make sure that whenever I make changes, that all of my images are optimized. So it will actually make like go manual, or I guess not manually, but it will automatically go through all of the image files and then compress the ones that need to be compressed and then push those changes to my branch. So I don't have to worry about manually optimizing the images, because I have a process that is automatically running whenever I open a new pull request that triggers it to run.
We have a GitHub action set up for the tap room that it automatically blocks you from merging a pull request until somebody's reviewed your code, just to make sure we're following best practices, especially for Shopify development. But we have a GitHub action that sends a Slack message to our pull request channel saying that so-and-so just opened a pull request. Here's a link to it. Here's some information about it. And it also will ping when somebody's approved it or somebody has requested changes. And I recently requested changes on one of the pull requests that one of my new devs had pulled out. And it just sends this message saying like, Kelly rejected your pull request, sad face. And I'm like, a little brutal.
Oh no.
So one other quick feature that I want to mention on GitHub but not dive too deep on is forks. And forks allow you to essentially copy a repository to your own profile. So if you wanted to create your own version of Dev2 or something along those lines, you could create a fork of it, and then you could add your code to that fork, and then you could make a pull request back to the main repo as well. So that's another feature that is GitHub specific that you might see as well, especially if you're working on open source. And that's another thing that I want to briefly discuss as well as contributing to open source. And Monica, I think you have a lot of experience there.
Yeah. So I would say in terms of contributing to open source, I think this is going to air after Hacktoberfest. But there's like this huge event every year in October that encourages new contributors or people who haven't contributed as much to open source to really contribute. So a lot of maintainers of open source projects, they put energy into creating issues that are very like detailed and descriptive and approachable for newer contributors. But throughout the year, you can usually find potential issues to work on by searching GitHub for things like good first issue. So that usually means that you don't have to have a lot of context that's specific to that project in order to make that contribution. And I would say like another way that you can potentially like find things to work on within the open source ecosystem is if you are using open source software. Like for example, if you're using Vue and you notice something strange that is behaving unexpectedly, you could open an issue or search their issues to see is this something that is currently being discussed, and potentially actually like implement the changes depending on what is required. And I would say in terms of what I look for when I'm looking to contribute to a project is making sure that they have like good documentation and it's clear how I can get like up and running quickly, what the expectations are for contributors. So there are different files. I know that like on GitHub, community health files is what they call them. So you'll usually have like a contributor's MD file or especially like a code of conduct file, things of that nature, to make it clear like what types of behavior are not acceptable and what types of contributions are welcome or not. So I would definitely try to like look through some of the meta documentation about contributing to a project before diving in to potentially help you like avoid wasting time contributing to a project if they're not maybe like looking for contributions in that area. So that is something to be mindful of.
That's huge. And I feel like I still get intimidated by contributing to open source, even though I'm so many years into this. I made a PR on GridSum's documentation recently, and it's just a documentation pull request. So it's not an end of the world by any means, but I was like, having multiple people that I know look at it before I submitted it. I was like, please make sure that this is okay. So I will say that especially if you're new to this, it is kind of a tricky process. I also want to shout out that we do have 2 episodes on Hacktoberfest from last year. So if that's something that you're interested in or want to learn even more about contributing to open source, we have a couple episodes on that as well. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Monica. We're going to do a quick round of shout outs. So do you want to go ahead and do yours first?
So I recently read this book, Working in Public by Nadia Ekbal, and it is a research book about like Git and GitHub and how does open source work. So I found that like super helpful to kind of get a better like overview of how GitHub works outside of the communities that I'm involved in. So she covers a lot of like interesting history about open source, as well as like what are like some different ways that people are monetizing open source, and really getting a better glimpse of like a lot of the different opinions that are within the community. A lot of the book does focus on GitHub since that is the largest place for like open source contributions, but there is like some stuff that touches on other platforms, as well as open source platform agnostically. So I would definitely recommend checking that out.
Awesome. Kelly, how about you?
So I'm going a little self-promotion this week. I finally released the audiobook version of my book, Start Freelancing Today. I spent 3 or 4 weekends sitting in my closet recording it, and my husband very kindly stopped and started me and told me when I was not saying the right words or that I sounded funny or I mispronounced something. And it was a lot of work, and then he edited it. So I'm really excited for it to be out in the open now.
That's awesome.
Allie, what's yours?
Mine. Okay, so as of recording this last week, I did my first ever Twitch stream, and it was something I was so nervous about, and I have no idea still what I'm doing. It's just a totally different world to me, but I had a lot of fun doing it, and people were really nice in the chat and built up a kind of cute community. So I'm having fun doing it, and I'm going to keep doing Twitch. It's very much out of my comfort zone, but I'm having fun with it. So that's my shout out. Monica, before we leave, where is the best place for our audience to find you on the internet, or a couple places?
Yes. So you can go to my website, which is aboutmonica.com, or I do have monica.dev. It'll just redirect there. And I'm also active on Twitter at waterproofheart. And as well as if you look on Egghead, you can find some of my lessons. So those are the best places to find me on the web.
Amazing. We will link all of those in the show notes. And clutch move on getting monica.dev, by the way. Did you get that day one?
Yes. So I went with a registrar that will actually, you like pay them, I think in advance, and then they would like automatically place the order for you as soon as it opened. So yeah, I was able to get it automated, or else I don't think I would have been fast enough. So
I love that.
That's amazing. Awesome. So if you like this episode, tweet about it. We love to read your feedback. This week, we're giving away a license to Egghead, so you can watch all of Monica's lessons. So if you would like to be entered to win that, go ahead and tweet about our episode. We post new podcasts every Monday, so make sure to subscribe to be notified and leave us a review. Talk to you next Monday.